That's a broad range. What's your favorite reading matter?
My favorite reading matter?
It doesn't matter here because people have all kinds of points of view.
I guess novels.
What kind of people do you admire? If you can name names, it's better. People you look up to. The Hellwood Convention, there's people in the field. Past to the present. Why do you admire John D. Rockefeller?
Because he had the ability to make a lot of money.
You don't believe me, baby. He's an admired man by a lot of people. All right. Anybody else?
I would say in general, anyone who I have this admiration for people who have the facility, not necessarily people who have a lot of money, but people who have the facility to make a lot of money. Doesn't necessarily go together. I have a feeling I'm in the wrong place.
And politics, which way do you lean?
I don't.
Right, left,
I am
center?
anti-politics.
Okay. Who would you like to see run the country? Anybody at all that you feel is a great person?
Bella Abzug.
Tell me a little more.
In general, first of all, I'm not a women's liberal, but I think that a woman should be in control of the country. I really think that a woman has the best heart and the best hand where the matters of a lot of people are concerned.
Why aren't you women's liberal?
Well, because I still believe that women should remain women. They should get equal pay for equal work, but a woman is still a woman. And she's not physically built the same as a man, and she's mentally not the same as a man. In some ways, she's superior to a man mentally, but she is, in some instances, more emotional than a man might be. Or
could that be upbringing?
Let's say that she shows her emotion more readily than a man might.
Could that be upbringing?
Could that be upbringing? A lot of it is upbringing, conditioning. Much of it is conditioning. Much of the man's coldness is his conditioning, let's put it that way. The woman is taught to react naturally to a situation.
All right, that's interesting. God, there is or isn't, I don't know.
I never did believe in God, but recently I have begun to think that there is a higher power. I don't know whether I want to call him God, but I think that there was some order to the universe and it was created somehow.
Oh, that's fair enough. Oh, I guess that about covers it. What would you do if you had $3 million? I'm assuming you haven't got it.
No, I don't have it.
What would you do if you had $3 million? Say $20 million, so you don't even worry about it.
I think I would become a great philanthropist.
Where would you put your funds?
I would put my funds into people.
What kind
individual of people? People in need to do something either creative or people who would be in a position to help other people. Those kinds of people.
Have you traveled out of the States much?
Out of the States much? Very little.
Where have you been?
I've been to Nassau in the Bahamas, California, New Jersey, Connecticut.
Okay, mostly the States.
Yes, mostly in the Northeast.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
Okay. You want to ask me any questions before I begin?
Well, I have no idea what this is. If anybody would like to tell me what this is.
It's a way of thinking. You know what a think tank is?
That is, I've heard that, and I don't. What's that?
It's for examining ideas and the way people think about things. Well, it looks like we're loaning books.
Let's go up next to
Mostly, what do you do around the book?
It needs to be revised anyway.
Hmm?
It needs to be revised anyway.
Oh, yeah.
I've got one here.
Anybody working with it? Yeah.
I've got one right here, too.
Okay, fine. That's recommended reading if you're interested in the ideas that we cover here. This is some propaganda on what the organization's about. You don't need to read it now, but the meeting nights down below, and etc. Okay. What do you want to discuss tonight? Anybody want to discuss anything in particular?
I'd like maybe that you continue some of the line of what you were talking yesterday about. In reference to, for instance, you said, well, just one example, for instance, clothing, what people really want. They want clothing that keeps clean, that you can change, you know what I mean, the color, and that you can change the texture, and so on. And for instance, in regards to light, nobody really wants one definite light source. You like to have even illumination throughout the house, and you like to be able to control that.
Trying to bottom line thing.
The bottom line thing, and in order in stating a problem.
All right, that becomes more difficult. We'll talk about that. Do you want to talk about something else there?
Frailty of analytical behavior, of analytical systems.
Yeah. All right. And what? The frailty of analytical behavior and what else?
Systems.
All right. Okay. Most people do try to think about things in terms of ideas and how they fit into the scheme of things, but most people don't have the tools for thinking about those things. They don't know enough about it to really think their way clear through anything. And they run into jams and they stop at the point where you can't get beyond that, you stop. And you read articles occasionally and you pick up a point of view which you may come to accept, which may be erroneous. See, whatever values we lock onto seem right to us at the time. Possibly when you were 18 you had a way of thinking which I'm sure is somewhat different now, or isn't. And as you get older, sometimes if you're exposed to other ideas, you undergo change. And some people do not undergo change very much because they're getting a lot of reinforcement and reward with their present way of thinking. And so what we do is examine human beings in the light of the influence that society has upon them. And we try to talk about things that people really want. It's a form of, if you wish, psychology and social thought in terms of societies, ideas, and the general makeup of human systems. I use the term systems because I feel, I want to compress it for you a little bit, that if you were brought up by a Chinese family as a baby, you'd behave as an Oriental. You understand that? You're not influenced by anything else. And everything you did would seem right, everything you did would seem right and normal to you. And if you're brought up by the headhunters, you'd be a headhunter if you never heard of anything else. So we don't know whether there really is such a thing as an individual. It might be a person that have had exposure that you haven't had. And so you meet a person that has been exposed to many values, they come on differently. And you say, my, that person's quite an individual. But an individual to us is a composite people that have read different things or have been different places than you've been. We don't believe there is such a thing actually as an individual. And the ideas of individuality and creative thinking and success has no meaning here. We feel that there's no such thing as a successful person. There are people that are successful as painters, but they can't get along with other people. And some people are great photographers, and they're very poor at mathematics. So no one is successful as such. They just excel in certain areas. Excuse me. You know what I mean by that?
I have an idea.
Well, I mean that no one, no medical
I
doctor,
don't see why that doesn't make you a successful person.
well, because successful person implies everything. Now, you may own 19 different industries, but you might have stomach ulcers and night sweats and high blood pressure because you can't handle it. So physiologically, you're a failure. You might be in excellent shape physically, but not successful in business. You might be too much of a humanist. If you own a giant plant and you're outproducing other plants and you're taking new machines that do a lot of work and you're going to let go of 3,000 people when you're taking those new machines, you might not take them in, and you might lose your shirt because you got too much humanism.
So what does a human being strive for if he doesn't strive to be successful in some field?
He strives for an illusion that society gives him, because you can never attain success. Because what a successful person might be judged, for example, in the communist society, a wealthy person is looked upon as a greedy bum. You know, it depends on where you're brought up. And the family is, the ideal family is not commercial. I mean, you don't give your child $1 and say, owe me $1.25. You know what I mean? Your dad sends you to school and doesn't say, you're going to pay me back. He says, it's just a privilege to send you to school, because I'm able to do so. And we think that the future is going to be quite different, and we feel that this society will not be remembered well. It will be the ugliest society in the world. And so the things that most people believe in this society are erroneous, not so. And the most ideals that people have are not so. And women are not naturally more sentimental or emotional. They're made that way by society. Now the women of the future will be quite different. So will the men. The men will switch a little more and the women a little less. And so you come in more of an equilibrium. And makeup will disappear on women and men. I mean, you don't require that a guy wear lipstick or makeup, and you've learned to accept that, and someday women will be accepted as well. And we feel that a lot of people have developed industries with this superfluous decoration, which they call beauty. And I don't think you'd go out with a guy if he wore the same things a girl wore. I think that you might, when I say it depends on your own background. And what we try to do here is ask this question: what is it that people really want? Do they want success? And by success, do they want to be admired by others? You know, looked up to? That certainly is a shallow desire. If in turn you learn a lot of things that makes your life richer, you don't care whether people look up to you or not. You've got to remember, as you go back in time, if you can recall these conditions where some people said that the ocean was infinitely deep, and then they found out that it was 6.5 miles deep. It wasn't infinitely deep. And so the first person to get up and said that the earth was really round, not flat, he didn't get along with people. So if he wanted to get along with people, all he had to say is a little round, a little flat. And then he's a pinhead. Because having the courage of your convictions, regardless of how society feels about your thoughts, is freedom, as we see it, the nearest thing to freedom. And the nearest thing to freedom is to break from the patterns that society tries to superimpose upon you so that you can, what you call, think for yourself. Now, thinking for yourself, if you ever learn to do that, you're going to lose your friends. You learn to do that. And you're going to lose a hell of a lot of contacts that you used to look up to and admire. They will look different to you. And so a think tank is generally comprised of a group of people that try to examine ideas as such and question all of the things that we've come to accept as right and normal. For example, the aggressive behavior in some men might be brought out in schools where they say, come on now, a guy really does this and a guy does that. A guy puts his arm around a girl and a guy seduces a girl and a guy does this. And we don't know that a guy has those particular qualities, but we know that they are emphasized in movies, books, and guys pick it up from other guys. But men can either be, if brought up by women only, they will behave just as women. That men do not walk any special way naturally. They walk butch-like because the movies and cowboy pictures and things that kids see. If kids are brought up by 10 women and they never see men, little boys, and they walk like women and they think like women. And women think like women because they're brought up in a subculture, feminine culture. We think that the future will do away with those conditions because they're not real. You're not supposed to give little girls dolls and dresses. You're supposed to provide all kinds of things for little girls and let them pick what they're inclined to pick. If you want to play with electric trains, your dad helps you do that. And if you want to collect butterflies or frogs, he helps you do that, or your mother helps you do that. But if you start handing little girls dolls and say little girls do this, little boys do that, then you're superimposing your thoughts upon those people. And that's what the Nazis did. They said that the Jews and the foreigners and this are trouble causing, and so the kids grow up with that point of view, and they think it's real. First of all, reality and truth do not exist. Once you learn that, then you're well underway. Now, I'll tell you what that means. Let's assume you were searching for truth. Let's say you're honest and you're really looking for the answers for life. In order to look for truth, you would have to have a great deal of knowledge to know that which is true and that which isn't true. Like you make statements innocently, and I'm sure you're not a con girl. I'm sure when you said you look at the order of the universe, and you can't help but believe that that order just didn't come about by accident. See? But you probably know that the Earth isn't round, it's kind of flat at the poles. And sometimes a beautiful island is blown away by a hurricane and people and everything else. And sometimes a whole island is blown up by a volcanic eruption, killing women, children, dogs. Now, is that what you mean by harmony? That happens too. And every fish in the sea is eating every other fish. And every organ of your body has parasites chewing away like mad. And as you get older, the blood vessels lose their elasticity and calcium forms, and it's difficult for blood to get through this little hole here in the blood vessel. And instead of stretching, it ruptures. And so that isn't very ordered. And so when you look at the world honestly, you'll find there's a hell of a lot of chaos. Now, you haven't been around long enough. See, the time, say, you've been around in time is very, very narrow. But if you live to be 700 years old, you would see huge meteors that fall on the earth and kill 5,000 deer and flatten out the trees for 25 miles around, killing all forms of life. And then you'll see fissures in the earth that give off poisonous gases, killing all kinds of things. In other words, we get angry sometimes at technology because carbon monoxide from automobiles, but there's carbon monoxide from plants too, more than automobiles. Most people don't know that. And so when you look at the harmony of the universe, you'll see that the moon is all dried out. It has no water, no atmosphere, nothing. Well, they want to call that harmonious. Now, when you look at the planets, they're not all exactly 93 million miles apart. They're random. Some are here, and some go hurling around like that, and sometimes they collide. And sometimes a nova occurs, whereas a giant planet blows up, and all its particles are scattered all over the universe. So most people don't know enough about that, so they look out there and they say, oh, the peace and harmony. Well, I remember sitting at the seashore once with a priest, and he said, I can't help but believe in God when I look at the ocean and all that, and when I look at the lakes. So I took a drop of water once and put it under a microscope, and everything was killing each other in a drop of water, all types of microorganisms. And so I took him I showed him some books with showing cancer on children, gigantic. No, they've done nothing to hurt anyone. And, it doesn't make much sense. There are brain tumors in little children. There are hydrocephalics with water in the head, little innocent children. And so when you look at the world, since you don't live long enough, at one time, cholera or the bubonic plague killed half of the Earth's population. Jews, Gentiles, Negroes. It doesn't stop at Scandinavia. It just goes around. So when you look at the world, you consider what man did. He really converted most of the earth into a gigantic graveyard with his wars and stupidity. Man is said to be the highest form of life. And there are many things that man does that's detrimental to plants, the atmosphere, and other men. And there are many things that people do to each other, calling it love, in the name of love. And we don't think there is such a thing as love. We think more like this, that if you go out with 7 different guys, I'm sure you do go out with them because you need different things. That some guys meet your need and talk about photography, and others in philosophy, and some are great lovers, and some are great to converse with, but lousy lovers. So you go out with different people because they fill different needs. And eventually you settle for one person who generally interferes with your lifestyle because that one person isn't fulfilling enough. But the myth of love, perpetuated by this society, generates problems. And then everybody wants to have children. And children are a pain in the ass. They weep, repeat themselves continuously. They drool, and they require a lot of attention, and they repeat themselves linguistically and behaviorally continuously. And they don't have interesting conversations. You almost predict anything they say. Mommy, I want a balloon and so. It's not that interesting. But you get brought up, you're conditioned along certain lines, and you think that those things make sense. They really don't. That anyone that's brought up to believe it's fun to wipe a baby's ass and cook for your husband, you're some sort of a slave. And so we're saying this, that someday humans will not work. And work is disgusting, unacceptable from this point of view. But doing creative things is great. Someday there'll be art centers, music centers, cultural centers, big as the Pentagon and bigger, where you can go without any cost, without any fee. And any talented or what you call gifted child will be given the facilities to develop those. And that every child will be then given the facilities to become gifted. We don't believe there are such things as inborn talents. We think that anyone can do anything if they're brought up in the right environment to do that. Do you think you follow what I'm saying? You disagree with that, or you're not sure?
Well, I follow what you're saying. Some of the things that you say I agree with, and some of the things I disagree with.
Or you're not sure?
No. Most of the things that you said, I do have an opinion one way or the other on.
Okay.
But I do agree with some of the things that you said.
And we're saying this, that if you take
No,
children...
you're telling me that everybody in this room thinks the same.
No, I'm not. That's your interpretation of what I'm telling you. What I'm telling you is they all think in accordance with their background and major influences, and the people they admired have influenced them. The kind of movies and books they read set their values. The kind of songs you hear on radio and TV makes you whistle those songs. And the kind of dances that are dominant today are the dances you're involved in. And in the future, they'll say, my God, the Charleston, so rock and roll, 20 years ago, oh my God, what happened to you? So we think that man is transitional, that there's no such thing as a well-developed person.
But you're saying again, we think you're speaking for the whole group of people.
No, some of the members think this way. And so, let me put it another way for you.
Please.
I'm saying that human beings want something, but they don't know what it is that they want. They can't say, well, this is what I want specifically. You might do that if you're in some branch of science or in photography. You might say, I want a Hasselblad. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Hasselblad? Or I might want a Leica, or I might want a Camerette, or I want a Mitchell. But if you know what you want to do, then you know what you want. If you want to photograph eagles out in the field a mile away, you need huge telephoto equipment, and you need sound gathering devices so you can gather the sound a mile away and hit this focal point with a parabolic reflector. If you know what you want to do, then you know what you order. In technology, most people know what they want. If you want a rocket to go to the moon, you know how many G's you have to generate to get off the Earth. You know you have to move 7 miles a second. You know that you have to have materials that can stand enormous temperatures. The air that is parted in the nose of a rocket will melt any ordinary materials. And so on these re-entry vehicles, they use ceramics. And some of the metal even burns away. But it still protects the people on the inside because they know what they want. When they get to Mars or any other planet, they know what the gravity is before they get there. And so they arrange things to land in that area because they have information. But in our lives, we don't. Schools only teach you how to type, how to repair a TV set, how to dance, how to write. But they don't teach you how to live. They don't teach you how to find meaning in life or how to understand life. And there's a reason for that. They do it deliberately. And something else you ought to know about. All governments try to make sure that most of the population is not comprised of individuals, but are uniform, as nearly uniform as they can make them, with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag and everything else. So they're not concerned with what you would call the development of individuality. New art forms have a hard time moving in. And so we live in a nation that tends to be static. So are all other countries. I'm not saying any other country is any better. And the artist, as a rule, is one of the most dangerous. The literary people are the most dangerous to the future. Because the literary people, a lot of them believe, of course they've been brought up this way, most people have been brought up to believe that they should have a right to their own opinion. We are brought up to believe that no one should have a right to their own opinion. We believe, well, let me tell you what that means now. See, first,
Can I just say something for a moment, Jack?
Well, right after this
But I
statement.
know that I feel very flattered that you're directing this towards me, and I know that these people all came here, they have something that they want to say. And
Yeah.
all I'm feeling is I want to interrupt you every time you're talking. I want to say something too, and I
That's
know
all.
that everybody must feel
Well,
that
there's
way,
a question
you know?
period.
Oh,
Oh, so you'll get plenty of...
oh, because I feel like I'm
They'll get a
bursting at
chance
this
to move
point.
in. No. I'm saying then that the point that everyone should have a right to their own opinion. Now I want to tell you what that means.
Mm.
That would mean that if you, for example, were driving a very expensive car and somebody said, and I said, you know, hey, how come she drives a Rolls Royce? He says, I don't know. So I voice an opinion. I'm not going to change car houses or something. That's an opinion. The best thing I can say is I don't know. He said, well, what do you think she does? She lives in a big house with a foot. I don't know. Leave it alone. And so many people have so many opinions that are dangerous. Well, in other words, they walk over to somebody and say, do you think man will ever land on the moon? Not in 1,000 years. See? And if you bring up everyone with a right to their own opinion, it's dangerous. But bring them up so they have access to the facts. So that any child learns to go to the library, when he says, the Earth's crust is only 2 miles deep, he says, just a minute, goes to the library and looks at him and says, I'm sorry, you're wrong. See, give them information, not opinions. Now, to you, opinion and information is the same thing, probably the way you were brought up. But to a scientist, they don't say to another scientist, what is your opinion of this? Here's what they say. Some scientists want to do unusual things. Sometimes they want to get at a tumor in an area of the brain, and if you cut a way to get to it, you destroy so many useful areas of the brain, and the person's a drooling idiot when you get rid of the tumor. And some of the scientists want to know whether or not it's possible to treat that tumor without cutting into the brain. And they turn to another doctor and they say, what is your approach to that problem? Not what's your opinion. What is your approach? And he said, well, if we run soft x-rays from this point here, and then another one from this point here, it doesn't damage tissue much, but they all concentrate in the tumor. And it damages that tissue right there, like a magnifying glass, focusing light to this point only, but not burning anything else. And so they say to other scientists, do you have any information in this area? And one says, no, I'm not into neurology. I'll pass that. Then they say, well, there's a new disease that's spreading very rapidly in this country, and you're a doctor, you're from Germany, do you have any information regarding it? He says, no, I'm not in skin diseases, I've never really made dermatology my specialization, and I don't have enough information. That's great. And even in the technical fields, they say, we would like to be able to travel at 100,000 miles an hour. And they say to scientists, can that be done? And the scientists say, I'd have to study the question. Then they study it, and they say, are there any materials that exist on Earth today that can take air moving at it at 100,000 miles an hour? The answer is no. But let's say the federal government wanted to move something at several thousand miles an hour at sea level. And they say, can you do it? We don't care what you do. Well, the scientists might build a tunnel and decrease the air pressure in that tunnel. See what I mean? And so that they can attain it. But the scientists that do that, this scientist designs the bullet-like train, and another scientist designs the casing, and another scientist works on the rocket system. But they don't have opinions across the field. You know what I mean? They stop and they say, well, let's call in Dr. Jones. He knows more about concentrated energy delivery systems than any other man. And they say, what about sickness? In other words, if you accelerate up to 2,000 or 3,000 miles an hour, the forces on a human being. Can we make a train that can move from 2 miles an hour to 2,000 miles an hour in 1/10 of a second without killing people? Well, in all known systems, if you started at 2,000 miles an hour, you'd flatten out against the back of the seat. You'd turn to a blob. So they raise that question to physiologists. And the physiologist says, all right, you want a man seated in some vehicle and you want it moved at 2,000 miles an hour in a very short time without destroying the man. He says, I'm sorry, I'm a physiologist, but I'll have to call upon other people. He said, what do you mean by other people? Presidents. I said, well, we have to call upon physicists. Those people that study force acting on the body and what they call, there is such a thing as medical engineering. And medical engineering tells us that a chorus girl dancing is moving 30 pounds in each leg, kicking up, and they give you an idea of how much force is involved. and they tell the engineer how to design the seat. If the thing is moving this way very fast, then all the blood rushes to the guy's brain. And so what they do is they design a suit that they strap around this person. It's like rubber. So when you travel very fast, your legs don't swell and burst. It keeps them together. So there are biophysicists that are called in. And when the biophysicist says, we need a material we can wrap around the legs, and I turn to him and say, well, you're a biophysicist. What material do we need? He says, I'm sorry, I'm not a materials expert. But Alex is. What do you recommend? See? And they learn how to call upon people who are in different disciplines. But normal people walk over and say, do you think that the communists will ever build a great society? Not the... They don't know anything. They haven't gone there and made studies of the culture. And most people deliver bullshit continuously. And they have no information. And we maintain that you have to learn to be stupid by associating with stupid people. The more you associate with them, the dumber you become. So there's no such thing as a good brain. The brain is always the same way. And it depends on what you hear, what goes into that brain. And we've got to get rid of niggers, Jews, Swedes, and Irishmen. Get them out of this goddamn country, see? And they fill your head with redneck-type logic, see? And so that good brain, the better the quality of your brain, the quicker you can learn to become stupid. Is that interesting? So people think that you're born with good brains. You're not, because everything comes through the eyes, the ears, the sense of smell. You're brought up in a culture, and the brain is just a receiving mechanism. I can put Hail Mary, Mother of God on a record, or I can put Darwin's Theory of Evolution. The brain is the same way. Depends on what you pump in. Man cannot create anything new. He cannot think or reason. All of those are myths. Now, man does something, to be sure. When I say man, people, they do something. But they call it reason and thinking because they don't know what it is. I'm going to try to tell you what it is. All right? When you said you're in photography, what kind of photography?
I am not in photography. My ex-husband was
Oh.
in photography.
Do you do any photography at all?
Just my little
Oh.
camera.
Okay. You're brought up with certain types of disciplines. Discipline meaning some point of view. You're told that if a girl has a head like this and another girl has a head like that, she ought not to wear her hair out like that. It would emphasize that. And if she wear her hair up, and a girl with a head like this doesn't wear her hair out like that because it looks longer. So you learn how to balance it out. And that's the concept of aesthetics. And that sense of aesthetics that you learn is not true. Because if everybody in America had a nose like that and a chin like that, they would recommend that you go in for surgery and have your nose straightened out. Do you understand? There's no beauty. The world talks of beauty as though it's so. But if you bring up children with Chinese, Greeks, Frenchmen, Jews, and never tell them any stories about people, they will love any human being. Do you understand that?
Mm-hmm.
But if you start with beauty, then you poison the set of people toward, look at that funny man, Daddy, with the crooked eyes, you see? There's no funny people, there are different people. And so we want to raise children to love all human beings and not to talk of beauty, but to talk about people. And not to make yourself attractive, because that's a set. Why, you see a man that looks like this occasionally. I think you may have seen people that look like this. And this man has a bone through his nose. Because he believes that that's a form of beauty. And then he's got his hair tied in a little knot out there, see? And now, isn't that something? See, if you're brought up in that culture, we look funny to you. So we want to get rid of all the fucking myths that people have. Thousands of them, bullshit, that run through your newspapers continuously. And so we generated nations of pinheads that don't have any real information. And all of them have a low self-sufficiency. That is, they don't think much of themselves. Because they don't have enough knowledge to think with. And so I'm going to try to show you what creativity is. Try to. And if you get it, good. If you don't get it, I'll restructure it until you do get it, or get some of it. Okay. Now, you know what I mean when I say that people ought not to have a right to their own opinion. That would mean that if someone said to me, do you think that someday a television set will be this size and give us 3D pictures in color? I said, I don't know enough about electronics to answer pro or con. And that's great. That's the way I want people to be in the future. We want them all to be alike in that area. We want them to say, I really can't honestly say, I don't know. that. That being alike in that area makes us sane. In other words, if you know a great deal about nutrition, more than anyone in the country, and then everybody else goes to school and learns about nutrition, that'd be great if everybody knew about nutrition. There's nothing wrong with that. Why can't we be the same in terms of being sane? You see what I mean? In other words, when people get married, you don't, if you say congratulations, it may be a terrible thing they're entering into. It may be, and you don't know. If you say, I wish you a happy marriage and a long life and all that, that's bullshit. But if you do something for them in some way to enhance their lives or improve their relationship, that's how you say, I wish you a happy marriage. You give them the tools to be able to relate with better. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. This is what we talk about. We take that, all the words that people use have been given to them by educators in schools and the church, and all those words are false, that the English language or any other language has very little meaning. Like if you look up love in the dictionary, you can't find the meaning. If you look up any word, I had a delightful time the other day. You say, oh, you did, how wonderful. And you say, where did you go? And I tell you where I went, and then you go and you say, my God, it was awful. Because your concept of delightful time is different than mine. So delightful time has no real meaning. When a girl says, I met a wonderful guy, in her terms, he's called One Punch Malone. He's knocked out more people than anybody else. Now, your values are not like that. So we don't listen to many things people say because we call it noise. They make a hell of a lot of noise. And there's very little signal, meaning useful information. Now, the question is, must everything be useful? Well, if you go to a scarcity country, a country where there's very little resources, where very little water exists, they put water on an altar and they pray to the water because it's so scarce. They give it a high position. People that live near the Great Lakes, I'm talking about 40 years ago, even drink that water. They never pay much attention to water. The desert Arabs pay a great deal of attention to water. We pay a lot of attention to success, economic success, because our society says, what have you got to show? You know, let me see what you've made. How successful are you? And so the measure of success is not your quality of life. In other words, would you rather have, it's hard to say this for some people, the mind of Albert Einstein and Urey and all the other great thinkers, or the mind of John D. Rockefeller? See, John D. Rockefeller is considered a pinhead by anyone that thinks about these things. He's considered to be erroneous, stupid, aggressive, poorly informed, and highly opinionated. He's a very dangerous person. But I used to admire him at one time. I've never heard these views at one time. And so I used to think just as everybody else did. I said, good God, there has to be a creator. I don't know whether it's a guy or a gal or a force. Because how can all this come about without something initiating it? That's the way I used to think. And until I met a scientist. And I said, do you believe in God? He said, of course not. I never heard of anything like that. And I said, well, where did all this come from? And he said, have you got 6 hours? I said, yeah. He said, well, you come in Saturday for a couple of hours in my lab, and I'll try to answer some of your questions, not all of them. So I said, well, look at the waves of the ocean. It's what makes the waves. And he gave me a little bellows, and he put some water down, and I moved it, and we got waves as the wind makes the wave. Oh. I said, what makes you think? And he said, well, when the clouds cover the land and the sun shines, the air under the clouds cools and contracts. Clouds generate unequal air pressure when the sun is shining. What makes the clouds? And he shows volcanoes and all the different situations, rising gases from the earth and particles of dust and moisture. And he answered all the questions. I said, yeah, but where did it all come from? He says, that's too big a question. One thing at a time, see? And he said to me, what do you think is so beautiful about nature? And I said, well, some animals, like the armadillo, is equipped with protective armor. And to protect that little animal, it's a very mild animal, from other animals. But there's another thing called the rhinoceros bug. It looks like this. And it's got a little shell over its back. And they say nature provided it with that shell to protect it. But I didn't know this until I talked to entomologists, people that study insects. They said there's a certain type of worm that lives under the ground that has a little tube, and he sticks it right up to the underside. It's as soft as jello. And he drinks out the insides, and all that's left is a tough shell. Feel me? And I said, James was kind. I was very confused. And I said, well, what is the purpose of a horn on an animal? They said, that's to protect themselves, you know. And I said, well, what if the horn goes back this way? The scientist said to me. I never thought of that. He said, sometimes horns go like that. Sometimes they go like that. Animals are born with every which way horn. You understand? And sometimes they use them to protect themselves, sometimes they don't. They're too heavy. Rats, for example, gnaw at things. If they don't gnaw, the fangs go right around and kill them. Did you know that? Well, they have to gnaw at things. And so nature isn't so full of beauty. If you look at flowers, you will see the petals eaten away and the leaves eaten by all kinds of microorganisms. So it isn't all harmonious. And so here you have a big whale eating a lot of fish, you have other fish eating other fish, and whales shit in the sea and pollute it, and you have all the fish shitting in the sea, and we have outfalls here where hotels and all the shit goes out in the sea. There's a lot of things in the world that people believe, but they're given an inadequate language to think with. And so I'm going to try to tell you at this time, and I'll get back into the subject matter you want to talk about, Roxanne, in a minute or two. I was going to say that I'm going to try to show you what thinking is. I'm going to draw something on the board. You try to tell me what it is. Are you any kind of an artist?
I don't know.
All right. Okay. I'm going to draw this gadget. You tell me what you think it is, to the best of your ability. It'll take a little while for some of you here. Right. Okay. She said it was a movie camera. What else can you tell me about it?
One of those clock movie things.
Side view.
Oh, yes, side view.
All right. Now, in order for her to call that out, she must have something in mind, and these forms must represent something to her up to now. And that's not enough information to make that decision, but it's enough for her to make that decision. But if she didn't call it, I would have done this, then that, and then put keystone on the side here, you know, and everything else until somebody said, yeah, that's a movie camera. I would have even put the crackle finish on it, you know, and the view box and everything else. But I'm trying to say something, that a human being that never saw a movie camera could never call it out. So, you have to have known what that is. All right, we try another drawing and see if you can tell me what it is with as few lines as possible. Anybody do it?
Ferris wheel?
Right. Who said that? All right. Now, is there anybody that doesn't know what that is? Raise your hand. Sorry. Don't worry about it. Anybody that can't see the Ferris wheel? Raise your hand. Anybody that doesn't know what a Ferris wheel is? All right. There's a big wheel. I would have finished it with spokes on it and passengers in a little box that goes around at amusement parks. They would have had a popcorn stand and cotton candy there and everything else until they said Ferris wheel, see? But it's possible for the human brain to assemble something before it's finished. Normal people call it intuition, which is no such thing. See, when you meet a person, most people are very much alike. Well, they're alike in many ways. They say similar things. Really, does a guy say to you, I look at the tip of your hair follicles and I find that they are split, and I find the cross-section of your hair to be more like that, which generates the curly texture, and He doesn't talk like that. They say, hey, you know, you're attractive. What are you doing Saturday? They always say the same thing. Would you like to go for dinner? And would you like to go for a drive? Always the same thing. Come on up to my apartment. Nothing new. See? And so, by the time he said the 19th word, you know where the hell he's going, just like these drawings, you see? So people have no intuition. They have been exposed to systems so frequently that they can react before the event occurs. In other words, in very simplified terms, if there's a road washed out here and a river here, and you're doing 80 miles an hour and you're 30 feet in the end and your brakes are not too good, you can almost anticipate that you'll be in the water within 30 seconds. You don't have to be in the water to do that. You're not psychic. The events directly ahead are quite visible. And so people who say that certain types of human beings are going to have a lot of conflict all their life, they're not psychic. They can see in their behavior early evidence of the inability to relate to other people. Does that make sense to you? Mm-hmm. But normal people say, gee, she's psychic. She knew exactly what was going to happen. There's no such thing as psychic power. There's no telepathy. All these are mythical things. Astrology, all bullshit. Uri Geller is a trickster. And he uses dissimilar methods. And he heats them, and they bend. But he doesn't have any magic powers. There are no magic powers. Have you read many books on the East? Mm-hmm. Well, all of these people that do these strange things, levitate, they use tricks. They use things on their feet, chemicals, as they walk over hot coals. There's nothing that a human can do that is anti the laws of physics. No one can hold their hand in a flame and not burn. But they hold their hand in a flame in the background of the flame. Or they hold their hand, there are certain chemicals you can burn that produce a low temperature flame. And you can run your hand through it. You know what I mean? And so they've learned these tricks and they do it, and other people think, my God, mind over matter. See? And there is no such thing. No one can move books or anything by mind power. You can only move with your hands. You can move your underwear off, or you can turn on the shower, or you can open the door with a photoelectric cell. But you can't move objects without touching them. Now, there are people that do. It's called telekinesis. You ever hear of it? Mm-hmm. Right. Now, what they go to a certain house and the books fall off the shelf and the unaccountable things fall over. You ever read of things like that? All right. Many houses are built with a foundation, and sometimes the foundation is semi-rigid here, and sometimes it's softer here. And there's a state highway down here, and there's a rock fall running up at an angle here, strata, and a Mack truck goes by with a heavy load. And the resonant frequency of the truck is enough to send a shock up through the folds in here and knock the books off the shelf. That's the way it works. There's no magic. But normal people don't know about that. They don't have the answers to these things. And so they write books like Fate Magazine, There's Another World Watching, Are the Flying Saucers Here? Are people from other worlds now walking amongst us? Are they in Washington guiding? They wouldn't bother with that shit. All they have to do is fly over the earth and look at it. My God, look at the traffic jams, stupidity of the city. They don't need to talk to our president. All they have to do is look at our agriculture, look at the world today, and they'll leave. In fact, they'd send a quick mechanism, hundreds of thousands of miles, quick photos, and come back and say, forget it. Because there's nothing on earth that's significant yet. But man, when I say man, I tell them humankind have a tremendous potential that they can get out of the values that society put upon them, which are erroneous, dangerous, and false. Okay. I want to get back to that system in which you've been brought up to believe that human beings are capable of making decisions. And I want to try to prove that false, if I can. That a human being is not capable of making decisions. This always means me too. I don't mean to talk down, but fine. So I'm going to show you something strange. If you went out to the seashore and you saw a strange-looking house, say like that, and it was on what looked like thin straws, supported by very thin kind of straws you drink with, look like that. Say, my God, you'd say, how the hell can those thin members hold up that house? It doesn't look right. And scientists talk like this. They say, what is the compression strength of that tube? Let's say 100 tons to the square inch. I understand it now. See, we always look at things we're familiar with. When you put up a house, you got a steel column underneath it. And those steel columns hold up the building. But in the future, they'll be able to make metal so tough that it'll be very thin. And they'll do the same thing. We say, it just doesn't look right. It doesn't look right. What you're used to looks right. You know what I'm talking about? So normal people always want to get married and they want to live in a house like that. They call them individuals. See? Little tree here in the garden. But very few people want to live in a titanium sphere supported by a thin tube off a precipice with a heliport underneath that slides open, the helicopter drops out. Is that a home? What's a home? Well, should a home look like this? Just because you live in a world where everybody's alike, the way I look at it, they're all alike. There's so much alike, they shock the shit out of me. Their values are so uniform. And so the people of the future will have strange homes, very different. There'll be no lights, as I was telling Paul. When you open a book, the book will be illuminated. Right? The book alone. You'd have nothing hanging out. The whole inside the building will glow softly and evenly. You have a big dial here, and you turn it and change the color. I was telling him yesterday, you'd have clothing that changes its patterns right on it. When you're wearing a sports coat, it could be plaid or anything. It has a photo memory, any pattern you want. Now, the things that we live with today are stupid. You got some shoes that women wear that look like this, which is anatomically dangerous. And we have fashion illustrators that design clothing to be arrested in the future. So the shoes of the future will breathe when you walk and cool your feet. They'll have little cells in them that compress freon gas. And the hotter the day, the cooler your feet. The roof of your automobile will be made of a photosensitive material. When the sun shines on the roof of the car, the inner skin is converted to a negative, low temperature by the sun's action. You don't have a refrigerator, air conditioning in the car. So you don't have all of the things that we have today are cumbersome, poor quality engineering things. But we're brought up in school and we're taught that this is the greatest country in the world. Other countries don't have very much. And American way of thinking is great, and let's think American continual think. When I mentioned before that the beds you sleep in were designed in England, the language that we use is a butched English. The form of parliamentary government comes from England. That's their design. The automobile was developed in England, the steam car, and many things were developed in foreign countries. So how can you think American? Even the flying machine was made in Germany. A guy named Otto Lilienthal made over 1,000 flights in a hang glider. So we don't see any such thing as a creative person. Now here's what that means. That means if do you know anything about music, classical music, a little bit? Well, you know if you study music most of your life, classical music and popular music, you can listen to music and know that the composer was influenced by Bach, Rimsky-Korsakov. You can hear it in it. There's no such thing as an original creative person. You don't know where it comes from, so it seems that it's original. Because sometimes I look at a bunch of ping pong balls on the table, you know, and I say, here, I make a nice apartment house, you know, and I arrange it that way. But it's always suggested by something around us. See? Now, when you go to the movies and they create some monster from Mars, you know, and he looks like this, I mean, well, what they do is they take the face of a cow and the horns and the head of an eagle and they composite the eyes. They make a snake's eyes and they create the mouth of a pig and they combine these things and they call it the Martian beast. But it's always composite. Got an alligator skin. Have you ever noticed that? When you look at science fiction, there's nothing original. It's composite. All right. So a fashion illustrator, he takes a garment that looks like this. He goes to school or she goes to school, then they hang a little shit on there and say, now that's lovely, you see. Or they hang some shit on that looks like that and say, isn't that lovely? Or they'll hang a fur piece on there and say, now that's ingenious. Then they'll run the fur piece down around here. Or they'll go to France and notice they have a little puff over here and one there. You know, interesting. I think I'll put one about here. And now that's daring. See, this is all bullshit. Because in the very early days, when very important people looked like this, they had dresses designed to conceal that. No chin. Came up like that, see? And when smallpox was dominant, they made the veil to cover the detail. And all the pinheads of jeans Princess Bojo is wearing a veil, I think I'll get one of those things. And so people go right on getting what other people get. And that's why they've got nothing up to now. Because they are not individual, they are not free. And any land that keeps using the term, at least we're free here, beware. Because in a real free land, you don't need to emphasize it. Because you come into somebody's house and it'd be so different, so unusual, you would know that that person is different than other people. And then you'd go into another house and you'd see no television set. They go, gee, don't you have a television set? And they run their hand over things, and the image appears right on the wall. The wall becomes a screen. And you say, where's your record player? I said, I don't have one. Because in the future, we have all the world's music on one recorder playing all the time. All you do is dial the music you want and play it in your home. You don't need records and tapes and all that shit. All you want is a product called the music. You buy that or you're not sure. You want to be able to hear any record you want to hear, whenever you want to hear it, the middle, the end, or any other part. Is that right? But you don't want to have to take a record, put it on a player, and run it. You see? Because you're brought up in that kind of world, and it seems right and normal. You don't want to drive an automobile. You want a big fat dial in your car, and dial the arts or the music or whatever you want to do, and sit back and enjoy yourself. And the car takes you there. Nobody operates a space equipment, really. It's operated by computer. And so, human beings, this is what they want. They don't want to be bothered by anyone. They don't want to have to answer to anyone. They really don't. They don't want to pay taxes. They don't want to go to a park and they don't want any signs, keep off the grass. They don't want any signs, 30 miles an hour, right lane only. They want to do what they feel like doing, as long as they don't hurt anybody. This is what most people want. Most people want infinite purchasing power. They don't want to go into a store and look at a dress and it says, you know, $2,000, and then they look at one, $250, I'll take that. Most people don't buy what they want. They buy what they can afford. Most people don't live the way they want to live. They live as they have to live. You don't own the kind of camera you want. You own the kind of camera you can afford. So what the hell good is freedom if you don't have what you want? Because you know what you do. You told me you knew what you do if you had $20 million. You're not doing it because you don't have $20 million. So I don't really know what you're like. I only know what you're like in your poverty, or the way you are now, economically, see? But if you came into $20 million, I'm sure you would change your lifestyle. So she says, oh, so that's what she's like. I said, no, wait till she comes into 80 million, you see a different person. So people will do different things in different circumstances. That's why it's very hard to know what people are like, because you can't find out. Now, sometimes we seem to make a decision. The kind of person that I admired that used to teach history, he was a very nice guy, and the kind of furniture he had in his house looked like this. All the chairs were like this, and they had all kinds of ornament on the legs and things like that. And I liked the guy very much. I mean, I liked listening to him. So I always wanted that kind of furniture because by association it was pleasant. But in my life, I found just the opposite. People that had Chippendale furniture had a Chippendale value system that dates back to King Henry VIII. They were obsolete in their views. When I went into a person's home and he had unusual furniture, space-age type stuff, you know, new, I would say, gee, these people are looking. They're trying to find new ways of doing things. They were exciting and different. When I found in Hollywood the first person that did things like this, see, in the early days when they made a movie, they had the camera on a mount, on a stand, and they photographed a sailor in bed in a bunk, and another sailor in this bunk, and another sailor here, lying down talking to each other. And the camera would photograph this man, and then it would turn around and photograph this man. They photographed different people. It took them a long time to put the camera in the bed with the sailor right here when he was talking to the other guy. Then suddenly they moved the camera up there. That's more like it really is. And so when you had a child talking to his daddy, you always had his daddy photographed at full level. Now they drop the camera down 3 feet and turn it on, Daddy. And Daddy would say, yes. You know, that's more real. And so to get away from the stinking movies that they make and do new and bold things, to change things, to try to put a movie camera behind a snake's eye, behind the eyeball, or make a model of a snake's eye and photograph things through the snake's eye, and you see a whole new world. Imagine, like I said before, a chicken hawk can see a dime in the top of the Empire State Building. Did you know that? Why, a man can only see a 3-foot ball. So if you photograph things through a hawk's eye and ran movies of how a hawk sees the world, it'd be fantastic. They don't do that because everybody goes to cinematography school, and in that school is a standard repertoire. Ballet, the same old shit. Oh, shit. Over and over again, instead of breaking and coming up with new stuff. I also want to say this in closing on that chapter, that the violin looks the same as it did 200 years ago. We want to open new institutes of music and generate new instruments for this age, strange and different, and open up the art world, break through, because they're dead. They're still stabbing themselves in the opera and singing for 3 hours with a knife in their heart. It's ridiculous, preposterous, most opera. And so, we want to move this age up into the future. Those plays are ridiculous. They don't make much sense, but they make sense to normal people because they're insane, normal people. Insane would mean unsane, because the way they think is wrong and dangerous. Because very few people walk over to their children when they're very young and talk to them as though they were adults. They don't say, well, Billy, what would you like to do today? Well, I've considered going to the zoo, but I might find the museum more interesting. All right, we'll do that. And Dad says, I think we'll take a drive out toward the beach, and the child suggests that they go the other way. They might see a new bridge they're building out here. It might be more intense. It's a good idea. But listen, you kids, get in the back of the car, and I'll tell you where we're going. See, we don't have democracy in the home. Most homes are tyrannies, where your mother says, you're not going to art school. You're going there. And you bring a guy home, and your parents say, I don't like him. The milkman's son. Who goes with the milkman's son? This person here is going to be a doctor or a lawyer, and they don't ask you whether he's a decent human being, warm, is he successful. Then you might as well open a whorehouse. They'd make $50 an hour or $200 an hour. You see, they're selling to the highest bidder. And so family life today is corrupt. But family life in the future makes everything for the children small. The toilet bowls are small, the furniture is small in their room. Everything is too big for children today. It's like you living with giants. See what I mean? So we will change all of that. And no mother will be permitted to raise a child. No family will be permitted to raise children. First you have to love children, know a great deal about them, and learn how to handle them. And so people will work with children that love kids. So you spend a lot of time with them. You pick up, but you never pick up any one child and say, now isn't she the pretty one? That will disappear. You'll pick up a lot of children. And you'll never make one number one. Because then you make jealousy and envy. So jealousy and envy is not human nature like they tell you it is. It's manufactured. Now let me tell you, I had a dog in the house for years. Then I got a cat. And I walked out and the dog was chasing the cat all the time. Because I put the cat on my lap and I was stroking it. See? And that dog, he just resented that. So what I did is, I used to believe it was a natural thing for animals to do. Until I learned about behavior. I found that if you put a cat on your lap and drop a little liver down to the dog, every time you pick up the cat to put it on your lap, his tail wags, because it means liver. You know what I mean? This way, when you pick up one child and put it on your lap, you negate the other child. And when my son would say, Daddy, pick me up, and I say, well, you're the older one now. This is your younger sister. If, she's just a little girl, that child feels that. But if you tell a child, this is your younger sister, what would you like to do? How would you like to play with her? Instead of separate them, generating competition, which is dangerous. This society says competition is good. It creates incentive. It creates embezzlement, incentive to be corrupt, make deals. It creates all kinds of lousy incentives. And the incentive that it creates is detrimental to human beings. We feel that the people of the future are not going to try to beat anyone. If you can run faster than I can, I'm glad. I'm happy for you. And I say, damn it, she can run faster than I say, how do you do it? And you say, well, why, Fresco, you take 2 short steps, take 1 step. I said, thanks a lot. Well, why do I have to beat you? If you make a fine painting, why can't I look at it and admire it? Why do I feel embarrassed? Because I'm an artist and my market value drops when I look at your painting. But in a system that's sane, we admire everybody for where they're at. We try to help everybody move up. But no one has ever looked down upon them. There are no criminals, no judges, no lawyers. All lawyers are all frauds, all of them. Because they represent you if you get there first, me if I get there first. And if I say you get a conviction on that young lady, you're in politically because the public doesn't like her. So you do everything you can to get a conviction. You don't try to find out the truth. You try to say, all I want was yes or no. Were you in that building at 8 o'clock in the morning on February the 5th? Don't give me a yes or no. That's all. Thank you. They're not interested in the truth. They're dangerous. They're corrupt. And judges are just as stupid. And someday, all these things that you looked at and admired, only 12 years from now, not that far off, all of this stuff will go down as ugly and stupid and sick. You're entering a new kind of age with different values. And so, there's a book list that I gave you. There's a lot of books on that list that talk about things like this that you can get at the library, which, if you continue to pursue, for whatever reasons, you will lose your friends. This is a normal reaction to getting a new set of values. Or else, you have to change your way of thinking. Okay. Now getting into the subject that you want to talk about, Roxanne, that was
Analytical systems.
analytical systems. Right? We use such terms as analytical systems. We talk about people that try to analyze a situation. And people that analyze a situation are like this. This is a situation. This is a coach. And in the days when they made coaches, they had a coach builder analyze a coach. And all he can do is think in coach-like terms. But he never thought in terms of automobile terms, because no one can be analytical. To be analytical is a strange word, because analytical is this. What is the function of a coach? To move human beings, in some instances, from point A to point B. Can it be done by any other means? It can be done by conveyor. It can be done by a hanging chair from a rail. You know, it can be done by a pulley wheel with systems suspended from it. It can be done by monorail, by rails, by surf water, by ground effects. It can be done many ways. But coach people think coach-like only. And so what is a secretary? Why does a boss want a secretary? Because he has letters he wants typed, or he wants to get laid, or whatever the hell it is. So he's got this girl there typing, and he really doesn't want a secretary. He wants a machine that he talks to and says, look, I want you to build that corporation for $2,000, and about a month late, he wants to talk to the typewriter in any kind of English, and he wants a typewriter to be connected with an integrator that integrates the language and spells it out correctly. See? And then all he wants is the ready-made. He doesn't even want that paper. He wants it to appear in Jones' office. He wants to talk to his typewriter, and the thing comes right out in Sam's. He don't want it. But when he gets, he's got to fold it up, put it in an put a stamp on it, and mail it. All he wants is Jones to know about what he's got in mind. This is what a doctor wants. A doctor thinks he wants to practice medicine. He thinks he wants to be a surgeon. He doesn't know what he wants. Let me tell you what a doctor wants. When you come in with broken bones, what he'd like is that system to be healed without touching it. But he doesn't know how to do it. So he's down there working it. When your child cuts their skin, you put a bandage on. When the cut is very deep, then you have stitches put in, because you don't know how else to do it. So doctors really don't want any illness at all. They don't want to participate in surgery. You don't want a telephone in your house. What you really want is other people to know what you're thinking. You know what you want? You don't want to have to call the milkman and say, hey, don't leave any milk for 2 weeks, I'm going on vacation. You would like, when you walk out that door, the milkman doesn't leave any milk. He knows about it. That's what you like. You'd like to walk into a store, and instead of looking at 10,000 dresses, you would like to see the kind of dresses that you would like. In other words, if they show you thousands of pictures of homes, and you say, I like that one, I like that one, I like that one, and they categorize your mental set in many areas, and when you come into a store, only those dresses will appear that you have a propensity for. The type you're not interested in will not appear. Now, this is what humans want. Humans don't want to change tires on cars. They don't want to go into a gas station, say, fill it up. They don't want that. They don't want things to wear out, break down. They don't want to have to turn on the lights. They want to walk over to an area where they open the door, the light goes on. And they don't want to pick up a record and put it on. They just want to press play, and the record goes on by itself, and the arm moves on. When you move the arm by hand, you remember those things, I don't think. You put it on by hand, and it would scuff all over the place. You know, you'd scratch your record. This thing puts it down as gentle as a gnat's ass. Really gentle. And it takes good care of your record. And you can play repeat. And some record players are hermetically sealed. All the records are stacked like a jukebox, but they don't look like jukebox. And all the records are picked up and stacked and dust-free. Now that's what you really want. And people want this. They don't want love. They really don't want love. Love is a sickness which is recognized by this society and blessed. And anyway, it's such a wonderful thing. Let me tell you what people want, what they're really looking for. They are looking for, most people, let me show you what this love shit is about. Most people are negated most of their lives. When you go to New York City and subway trains, thousands of people, and they don't even look at each other. They have no recognition. If a family has 20 kids, and you say, get out of the way. And the kids have no identity. But if you turn to a child and say, hey, Billy, what are you doing? And they say, I'm making a picture. Well, tell me about it. And you gave all the kids identity. Love, warmth, acceptance, the kind of love I'm talking about. Then these children don't go looking for it because they've got it. Now, if you have love in your home in the future, if you have it in the new society, then you don't have to walk around with somebody put their arm around you and make you feel secure because you're loved by so many people and you feel so rich and so loved, and just stop seeking that. That no one person can give you love. They can only give you a portion of what you have need for. And in the future we'll talk about love as a system of relating and exchanging ideas and values. And this you learn. You meet a person, you relate with them, and as time goes on, your relationship becomes richer and better. That's love. But you don't fall in love Wednesday morning. This is bullshit. This is two people that have been negated most of their lives and unhappy and say, you'll never amount to anything. Finally goes out one day and goes, gee, you did that thing. That's lovely. And he's inspired. And nobody ever patted him on the back. When he was a kid, he went like that, and Daddy said, you're messing up the rug. Now go out and play. And then one day he did something like his girlfriend said, gee, that was terrific. And so he now feels warm for that person. But some of us are so lonely. You would go to parties, thousands of people, and yet we're alone because we don't have any real identification. Everybody seems happy telling jokes, but there's no warmth. Not really. Hey, there's a better party out that way. Let's go. And they go off, but it's not real. If you own a big yacht and you invite 50 people on, sure, they're happy to go on board your yacht, but they're there because you got a yacht. And if you lose your yacht, say, I'm broke, I say, no, I'll see you next month, maybe if I can get around. So this is sick. And so we want people, the people of the future, will have a totally different kind of relationship, but there'll be no hate. Because no one can hurt you. No one can do anything to you to hurt you. No one can upset your life, because you don't have to answer to anyone. I mean, when you go to the library in the future, you don't say, can I take out this book? They say, no, that's a reference copy. How about this book? They say, well, somebody put in for it. Maybe you could call in 3 days. Then you're subject to that shit. The libraries of the future have multiple books. And you say, can I take this one out? They say, what's the name of the book? You say it's D4. It's a book on different cultures and different lands, how the Japanese family lives. And that book, there's just a little, they press a button there. And there's a book in your house called The Blank. And it's scanned quickly. And it's that book. You don't carry little shit out of the library home. You don't want that. You want the end product. So you got a lot of school kids today carrying books. They carry it to school and they try to get on the bus. It's very dangerous. Especially young kids while they're growing, carrying all those long full of books, trying to get on. They fall and pick them up. You ever see that? The bus is about to start. Well, these kids have a set of books at school and a set at home. You don't need to carry them up and back. And so, we change so many things that you don't have the same reaction in people. What do you think would happen to men if they were brought up in a society where everybody walked around nude, ever since they were babies? Do you think they would look at tits, legs, and ass? Don't you think they'd look at the eyes of another person when they talk to them? And suppose you show them a photograph of a nude woman. They say, I can't see her face. I don't know what it is. But your society covers it up. And we maintain that if you covered up women, they just put powder puffs over their ears and told the guy that he can see an ear exposed at a certain bar one night, he'll rush out there. Because this society made them that way. Men have no nature. Animals have no nature. It's all manufactured. Now, so if you go on along these lines, we ask this question, what kind of world do we want? What kind of people? Well, let's design that world to generate that kind of person. You want Nazis? Put a Nazi in there, you make Nazis. You want Catholics? Put in dominant Catholicism in the schools, and you'll generate a lot of Catholics. And if there are any atheists in town, move them out. And you'll have no different thoughts. And if you want everybody to think alike, don't have on Sunday why I don't believe in God. They never have that. You can't turn on your TV in a democracy. There's a guy, a nice guy, with a family, how he found peace and happiness through atheism. I never see that on the air. I never see an old grandfather picking up his little child, and the little child says, Daddy, where did it all, Grandpa, where did it all come from? Then he gives him the origin, the evolution, and all this and this. He doesn't open the Bible. You don't have that on TV, because that's thought control. Thought control is when you don't have every idea on TV. You ought to have Carter, Ford, a communist, an atheist, guy that thinks they're all full of shit, a woman's liber, anti-woman's liber. Every point of view, that's democracy. And that's the kind of world I'm talking about. A world in which we're not afraid of ideas. We welcome new ideas, because that generates what you call broad-mindedness. And so, when we raise our kids the new way, sex changes. What happens is, since guys stop looking as they do, they don't have sex as frequent, and it's not that important to them. There are other things. And what happens to the lonely people? They are not that lonely. And so we bring up children to want to be alone. Now, here's how we work that. We work it out so they're happy being alone. Here's how that's done. We fill a room up with interesting things for a child. And let's say it's painting or blocks or something, and they're working on it, and you watch them through a half-silvered mirror, but not as Big Brother. You just watch them to see how they spend their time. And when they're enjoying themselves, and having fun, say, go out and play with the other children. Oh, but I'm having so much out and play. And so every time they're alone doing creative work, you order them out, and they love to be alone. And most people can't stand themselves. They're home alone and say, I've got to go to a bar or something. There's nothing happening here, see, because they don't know how to use their time. But if you had a music room, a library, clay modeling, dancing, photography, many areas of interest, you would almost resent the intrude a party. You go to a party for. I have so many things to do. You see, your life will be so filled with things. And most people are not trained. No school, very few schools, provide children with the ability to find fulfillment in their own way, in their own existence. And then, when you meet with another person, a fulfilled person, you don't meet with them because you're deserted alone, because you need company. You need somebody to praise you. People say, oh, I need compliments. Suppose you found out that in the time when people were religious, that they used to say that the reason kids get sick is because of the wrath of God, the fathers sinned and all that, and so the nation suffered. But you found out that vaccination can do away with that illness, or lower the probability of it. You're going to lose a lot of friends. So a scientist never seeks approval of anyone. They come up and say, by the way, folks, the earth isn't flat, it's round. They don't get approval. Oh, no. And so they feel secure because they found out. And when a man builds a flying machine, he flies, and somebody says, oh, you'll never fly, it doesn't bother him at all. Because he has what you call, in the old language, the courage of his convictions, or in a new language, he has the knowledge to accomplish flight. And so normal people say, well, you can't do that, it doesn't even threaten me. But we walk around and we show people our painting. You say, do you like it? They say, no, I don't like it, then we feel bad. Paint, in the future, you'll paint a picture of a butterfly's anus, and you'll hang it on your wall. And when she comes in and says, I don't like that at all, and say, you've got a problem, baby. So a well-adjusted person doesn't give a shit about what other people think. They will share their ideas with other people and say, by the way, I found out if you do this, you tend to get a hemorrhage. He says, is that so? How interesting. See, you don't fight anymore in the future. There's no arguments. Did you know this, that argument and debate is manufactured in schools and in movies and in books? But scientists do not argue. Let me show you what they do. If one scientist says, we're building an airplane now to do 3,000 miles an hour, the other scientist, let's say he has the old quality called disbelief. Here's how it's expressed. How do you handle heating problems on the canopy? The guy said, well, we use a high-temperature Pyrex laminated with metal particles in it to deliver the heat so the glass doesn't melt. He said, all right, what's the landing speed? He wants to know that. Say it's 300 miles an hour. Well, how can you land on any existing airport at 300 miles? See, that's inquiry. He says, well, we have air blasts that come up from the runway when the plane is landing at 200 miles an hour. So the airplane is actually moving at 100 miles an hour. Hey, that's, see, instead of saying, why you can't land, why that's not possible. All you're giving is your own limitations of knowledge. You see what I mean? All right, now, you know they're putting synthetic hearts in people now, don't you? What's the name of the great doctor that did a lot of heart transplants? Bernard. He said that the future is mechanical hearts. They're smaller and they're better than living hearts. No, Bernard. Who was it? Debate said that? Okay. He said mechanical hearts are smaller and they take up less space and they're more reliable than a heart transplant. Now, suppose your mother had heart disease, assuming you loved your mother, and she had this mechanical heart, she was still the same person. Would you feel that this heart was going to give her another 20 or 30 years? Would you feel it's a great thing? Now wait. Suppose you lost this eyeball and won't realize it. Suppose somebody developed a small television camera that looked just like the eye, connected to the brain so you can now see. And you can move it around and it's soft and pupils dilate just like the eye, and it tears, you know. And let us suppose now that a person lost their arm and you developed a bionic arm that felt like flesh and blood. And let us suppose that somebody, a friend of yours or your daughter, had a kind of a tumor of the brain here, and a lot of the facilitation was gone, and they made a synthetic material like Jello that can carry out brain function. Suppose half a brain is gone, but you're still the same person you knew. We're saying that human beings are near the end of their evolution. There's a new age coming in which you'll see synthetic beings, smarter, warmer, different than humans. And they're coming. Just like evolution changes things, man thinks that they're the highest form of life. They're on the way out. There's a new form coming very soon. They'll be able to generate new tissue, new blood vessels of a different nature. And so, there's a book called Future Shock. Have you ever heard of it? Yeah. It's a little bit about the coming future. But what we talk about here is the very near future. These things are not far away. They're very near. And you're going to see these things. But if you have an old world set, you're going to be confused. But if you know roughly what's coming, you're not that confused. You know what happened to people, say, about 75 years ago? If you turn on a television set, they get in and run out of the room. Unholy. It's unholy. And so, we don't know. The future may offer a whole new set of things, very different kinds of things. So, getting back to the idea of reasoning things out or thinking things out, you've got to remember that you're always dated and time-bound, that all of us are in a certain time, and our decision-making system is like the times we live in. And so when we evaluate anything or discuss anything, we discuss it with those chains of this time. So no one can be open-minded. It's not possible. Because an open-minded person would mean they can see the future, the past, the present, you know, and so that they can make an appropriate statement. Open-mindedness cannot exist because you're the victim of habit. The reason you send your clothing to the laundry is because it's not self-cleaning, is that right? But suppose you were very advanced and you had an ultrasonic cleaner, no fluids, nothing. It cleans your clothing instantly, like a no drying, no hanging it out, no pressing. And I say, where do you do your laundry? You say, well, my clothing is self-cleaning. I become confused. I say, well, I notice that when you go to sleep at night, you don't toss and turn at night. Well, most people do. They change their posture. On the top view, they lie like this sometimes, then they turn over and they spread out, and they change their posture all night long. And the reason that they do that is because when you lie in bed, circulation cuts out when you lie on the side in this part of the body. And so you automatically turn over. And now the flow begins here. And when it begins to cut out here, you turn again. Some of us go to bed so tired that we fall asleep on our arm. And we wake up suddenly, we can't even feel it. You ever had that happen to you? That's because you cut out the circulation. So the beds of the future have pulsing sections in here that inflate and deflate and distribute the pressure, so you don't have to roll around, and you get real good sleep. You understand? So the normal things that people do, the things that they've come to accept, is obsolete. And so the main theme of this system is learning how to use your brain in a new way and making it possible for humans to bridge the differences. In other words, if our people went to China, our government, and they said to them, what is communism? And they said, well, this is how it operates. And they say, well, isn't it possible that the leaders might be corrupt and take a little more for themselves? And the communists would turn around and say, isn't it possible that in the free enterprise system some of the leaders might take a little for themselves? You don't have complete free enterprise, a little corrupt and a little free enterprise. We don't have communism either. It's a little corrupt. Now, is a church completely godly and religious? Certainly not. Nothing is really what it pretends to be. And so man aspires towards something but can never attain it. That's why love is unattainable. I'll try to prove it to you in one more statement. When you fell in love when you were 17, it's not the kind of love you would look at today and say, yeah, that's it. Today you say, oh my God, I was just infatuated. That wasn't real. Now it's real. And when I meet you 2 years later, it's house sand, you say, forget it. Because you keep changing, growing up in your value things. That's why you can never arrive. You can never become a well-adjusted person because things are always changing and you adjust to the new thing. But if you became well-adjusted in 1927, you'd be obsolete today. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And yet psychologists talk about becoming well-adjusted. They're stupid because they live in an obsolete value system. And as you go on and learn new things, you might see the people of the future not wearing eyeglasses. And they might have a book. And when their eyesight is somewhat diminished, the lettering becomes larger in the book automatically. Smart books. You'll have a car that takes care of itself. That's hard to believe, isn't it? All right. I just want to say this one thing. It seems that in the aircraft industry, this is the front view of the landing gear or wheel on an airplane. They made a new type of stainless steel. If you crack the inside where you can't see it, the molecules let go and fill in the crack. It's called self-healing stainless steel. Isn't that interesting? All right. They're working on mechanical systems now. Eventually you'll have shoes. The more you walk, the more the soul builds up. It converts oxygen into a multiplication of synthetic substances. And so there will be self-repairing engines on automobiles. You won't have to do anything to your car. It'll be hermetically sealed all up. Now your car will be smart too. It'll have radar in front, sonar, and a scanning device. So if a child got on the road, the brakes go on automatically. You know, oh my God. On a wet pavement, they say on Coral Way, it says, drive carefully, slippery when wet. Did you ever see that sign? Coral Way will have certain types of, there's a lot of what we call carborundum dust, which can be manufactured into long cylinders embedded in the highway, so it's never slippery, wet or dry. So there are no signs slippery when wet. You don't want a sign. You don't want the highway to be slippery when wet. Is that right? So, since human beings don't know how to state what they want, the new system, the system that we talk about, tries to give them a point of view to prepare them for dealing with other people without ever getting angry, without ever feeling resentment. And you don't. You don't feel resentment because you stop looking for justice. That's why you get sick. You get sick when you look for justice. This is no such thing. You just do the best you can for another person, and if they hit you on the head at night when you're asleep and rob you of everything, just say, you know, my judgment regarding that person is quite wrong. And that's the truth. The other person is never bad. If you meet some guy and you think the world of him, and he turns out to be a son of a bitch, you say, that no good son of a bitch, and we say, your ability to judge people is poor. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So in the future, you don't get mad at anybody. You update your ability to judge people. So when you put the wrong mixture together and it explodes, you don't put it together again. Okay. Any questions about any of this stuff? We generally go to coffee, and you know, Lisa, if you want to join us, you're welcome.
Yeah, okay.
You go ahead and notice?
Yes.
So you recommend that picture?
Yeah, I think
I want to see it.
I think it was pretty good.
October the 7th.
One film.
Yeah. It just shows the value systems of the police, the values of the population, how they react towards that type of story that was printed in the newspaper. The value systems of the newspaper man.
Yeah.
You know.
Is there anybody that analyzes it in the picture?
No.
That tells them why they do that?
No.
Why they sensationalize things?
Oh yeah, they sensationalize things, you know.
But
still,
right.
still.
Like the
Is that
journalists,
indicated?
Yeah,
the
that's
papers,
indicated.
Does it show how, and listen,
Yeah.
do this and play it up, you know, and
Yeah,
see
that's
that
indicated.
there?
It's also indicated that most people read this stuff.
And are influenced by it.
Yeah. Well, you see the reaction. She goes, after the story is published, she is going to a bar where she meets two girlfriends, and guys approach her.